The one who killed me was the person I loved most. Before I died, I only managed to swear one thing, whether in this life or the next: I will never forgive you. But when I opened my eyes again, I was back in the past, back to the very day I first realized I loved him. This time I would change fate itself, only the price I'd have to pay was something I never saw coming. Rain fell heavily onto the ruined courtyard of the estate. I collapsed onto the cold stone floor, a long sword driven deep into my chest, blood soaking through my robe. I looked up. Lu Yan stood before me, his hand still gripping the sword's hilt, trembling. "Why, you?" I rasped, my voice so weak I could barely hear myself. He didn't answer, only lowered his head, his shoulders shaking as if holding back a sob. Around us, the rebel forces had surrounded the courtyard. I understood Lu Yan hadn't killed me out of hatred, but because he'd been forced to. But in that final moment, I wasn't lucid enough to think it through. All I felt was pain, worse than the blade in my chest, the pain of being betrayed by the person I loved most. "I will not forgive you," I whispered, each word tearing at my throat. "Not in this life, not in the next." Lu Yan raised his head, looking straight into my eyes for the first time, not the look of a victor, but of despair. "Xie Han," he called softly, his voice breaking. I couldn't hear anything more. Darkness swallowed everything, even the last face I would ever see. As my consciousness faded, an image rose in my mind that had nothing to do with the battle. Lu Yan at 13, his hair tied crookedly, pulling me along the riverbank behind the estate, grinning with a gap-toothed smile, swearing we'd be brothers forever. From that child to the person standing before me now, what had happened in between? I wanted to ask, wanted to know who or what had forced Lu Yan to do this. But my tongue had gone stiff, my breath reduced to short gasps. That question would follow me to the grave, forever unanswered. The only thing still strong enough to hold my mind in that moment wasn't forgiveness, nor regret. It was a surging fury, drowning out whatever reason I had left. If heaven granted me another chance, I would never again be foolish enough to trust so blindly. That thought clung to me even as my vision blurred, even as the sound of rain grew distant, as if echoing from another world. The last face that stayed in my mind wasn't the one who had just struck me down, but that boy from years ago, his innocent smile, now twisted into the thing that would haunt me into death. Blinding sunlight struck my eyes. I bolted upright, my hand instinctively going to my chest. No wound, no blood, only the familiar coarse fabric of the clothes I'd worn in my youth. Around me was the courtyard behind my family's estate, the old locust tree casting its shade, cicadas shrieking in the midday heat. I stared, stunned, at my own hands, smaller, softer, without a trace of the years of warfare that were to come. Was this the past? Memory flooded back like a tidal wave. I recognized instantly where I was, what day it was, a summer afternoon at 18, the day I sat beneath this very tree with Lu Yan, listening to him ramble on about a sword match, and caught his smile in the sunlight, my heart skipping a beat without warning. The first day I realized my feelings for Lu Yan were no longer simply those of brothers. My hands trembled. Not from fear, but from the realization I had been reborn, brought back to that exact defining moment, not to any other point across the 20-some years I had known Lu Yan. Why this day of all days? Before I could gather my thoughts, a voice rose in my mind with no source, no shape, simply a foreign presence pressing against my consciousness. You have been given a chance, but remember this, fate has already been set. If you force it to change, the price will be your memories. Once destiny shifts successfully, all your memories will be wiped clean. I frowned, tried to ask more, but the voice offered nothing further, vanishing as quickly as it had come. Memories, wiped clean, I scoffed inwardly. Ridiculous. I had already died once, had already tasted betrayal deep enough to consume me. Some vague warning about a price meant nothing against the resolve burning inside me. I didn't need to keep my memories if keeping them meant reliving the pain of Lu Yan's blade in my back. All I needed was one thing, to stop that tragedy from happening again, whatever it cost. I clenched my fists, my gaze turning cold and sharp, nothing like the 18-year-old boy sitting in the sunlit courtyard. I brushed the warning aside. I never imagined a day would come when I'd have to remember it. Xie Han, what are you daydreaming about? A familiar voice behind me made me flinch and turn around. Lu Yan stood there, beneath the shade of the locust tree, sunlight filtering through the leaves onto his still youthful face. Bright eyes and unguarded smile, utterly unlike the tear-streaked, anguished face I had seen in my final moments. I froze, unable to speak. This was Lu Yan from years past. The friend I had trusted completely, who had grown up beside me through every childhood mischief, not the man who had driven a blade through my chest in the rain. What's wrong with you? You look pale. Lu Yan stepped closer, bending down to look at me, worry plain on his face. I studied him closely for a long moment, searching that innocent face for any trace of the traitor he would become. But there was nothing. Only the guileless sincerity of a boy who had never known betrayal. My heart clenched, caught between love not yet faded and hatred not yet cooled. I'm fine, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Just had a very long dream. Lu Yan had no idea that dream was the 20 years of his life he hadn't lived yet. Lu Yan stood waiting, his concern completely unfeigned. I forced myself to smile, lifting the corners of my mouth the way I had every day for the past 20 years of knowing him. But inside, part of me was screaming to pull away, to shy from the hand reaching toward me. That same hand which one day would drive a blade through my chest. Really, I'm fine, I said, keeping my tone even. Don't worry. Lu Yan narrowed his eyes at me for a moment, then laughed and plopped down beside me as if nothing were amiss. I glanced at him from the corner of my eye. That familiar profile, that familiar face, every feature I'd known by heart since childhood. But now, every affectionate gesture of his sent a pang through my chest, caught between love I couldn't let go and vigilance I couldn't shake. I had once trusted him absolutely. Had once believed nothing in this world could break our bond. Now I knew I could never be that naive again. Hey, are you even listening to me? Lu Yan flicked my forehead, laughing when I flinched. I'm listening, I said, rubbing my forehead, forcing an annoyed expression as I always did. Lu Yan went on and on about that morning's sword match, about how he'd nearly beaten their strict old teacher, his eyes bright with boyish pride. He talked with his whole body, leaning in close every so often to emphasize some detail, utterly without guard. This was the Lu Yan I had always known, carefree, straightforward, hiding nothing. I was the only one in this scene carrying the weight of a future that had already happened. I nodded, tossing in a word here and there, but my mind had drifted elsewhere. I wondered behind that innocent smile, was there already some seed quietly taking root, something that would grow, years from now, into a fateful blade? I found no answer. All I could do was keep watching and wait. The afternoon passed like any other ordinary day. Lu Yan and I strolled around the estate, stopped by our usual tea house, listened to him ramble about all manner of things. But unlike before, now every word, every glance from Lu Yan, I quietly dissected, searching for some sign of trouble. Had he mentioned anyone unfamiliar? Did he seem troubled about anything? Was anything unusual happening with his family? I asked carefully, weaving my questions into seemingly harmless conversation. Lu Yan answered naturally, without a hint of suspicion. Because to him, this was just an ordinary chat between two close friends, only I knew I was playing a part. It was a strange feeling, achingly familiar, yet unsettling in its distance. I sat beside my closest friend in the world, yet my mind was calculating as though facing a hidden enemy. As we parted at the estate gate, Lu Yan clapped my shoulder, grinning. See you tomorrow. I nodded, watching his figure disappear, my heart heavy. That night, I couldn't sleep. I combed through my memory for every detail about Lu Yan's family that I had never bothered with in my previous life, because back then, I had trusted him completely, never thinking to investigate my friend's background. Now, everything was different. I quietly had my trusted aide look into the state of the Lu estate, recent dealings, unusual expenses, any strangers who had come and gone. It was the first time I had ever done such a thing. The feeling was equal parts guilt and necessity. I told myself this wasn't a betrayal of Lu Yan's trust. It was the only way to protect us both from a tragedy that had already happened once. But somewhere deep down, a small voice kept whispering, if Lu Yan knew what I was doing behind his back, what would he think of me? I pushed the question aside and kept drafting the list of things to investigate, the candle before me burning lower with each passing hour. 3 days later, my aide returned with news that sent a chill down my spine. Lately, the Lu family had been in unusual contact with a mysterious figure, someone whose identity remained unclear, who always appeared at night and avoided attention. The estate's expenses had also shown signs of disruption, as if they were quietly carrying some hidden debt. I held the report in my hands, my fingers trembling slightly. In my previous life, I had never known any of this. Perhaps because I trusted too completely, I had never once looked closely into the Lu family's hidden corners. Not until it was already too late, not until that fateful night in the rain. Now, the first piece of the puzzle was beginning to take shape. Who was behind this? Why target the Lu family? And could this be the very root of the tragedy that once happened? I folded the paper and tucked it into my robe, my heart a tangle of worry and fragile hope. This time, I would not let myself stay blind. The days that followed drifted by like a gentle loop of memory. Mornings spent sparring together in the courtyard, afternoons studying side by side under the eaves, evenings wandering into town, stopping at every stall Lu Yan swore was delicious. I let myself drift along with the familiar rhythm, partly to keep up appearances, partly because I couldn't deny it. Some part of me truly treasured these moments. Lu Yan still fought to pay for the tea, still teased me about my messy handwriting, still bumped my shoulder every time he won a game of chess. There were moments I forgot I was carrying the memory of a life already ended. I was simply living again through the finest days of my life, beside the person I had once and perhaps still loved. But every night, alone in my room, reality would return, reminding me this wasn't a beautiful dream to be savored. This was my one chance to change a fate already written. One afternoon, caught in a sudden rain, I came down with a chill and spent the day laid up in bed. Lu Yan heard and rushed over at once, carrying a bowl of steaming medicine he'd insisted on making himself, despite the kitchen staff grumbling and refusing to let him near the stove. Drink up. I'm not leaving until you finish every drop, Lu Yan said, his tone firm, settling himself at the edge of my bed. I looked at the bowl, then at him. This was exactly how Lu Yan had always cared for me, without being asked, without hesitation, never counting the cost. It had been the same in my last life. Whenever I was sick, whenever I was troubled, the first person by my side had always been Lu Yan. My chest tightened, warmth mixed with bitterness. The very hands tending to me so gently now would, years later, be the ones to end my life. I drank the medicine to the last drop, unable to say a word, only quietly watching his worried face, trying to carve this image into memory, in case one day it ceased to exist. Late that night, I sat alone at my desk, going back over every detail of my previous life, the dates, the events, every name tied to that year's disaster. I kept reminding myself again and again, don't forget why you're here. Don't let his tenderness blur the truth that those very hands once took your life. But some nights, I caught myself smiling at the memory of some joke he'd made that day, or the way his eyes lit up while telling a story. The old feelings, the ones I'd once buried beneath a mountain of hatred, kept seeping back in, slow but unstoppable, like water through cracks in stone. I closed my notebook and rubbed my temples. I was trying to prevent a tragedy. But was I also, at the same time, letting my heart repeat the same mistake all over again? That question I didn't yet dare to answer. My aide brought back new information, his voice careful. Lately, the Lu family had been under constant pressure from some hidden force. Several merchants who'd long done business with the estate had suddenly withdrawn without explanation, and a few longtime allies had grown strangely cold. Someone's trying to corner the Lu family, my aide said, but it's unclear why or who's behind it. My hand clenched. This was exactly what I had never known in my previous life. Had the Lu family been quietly enduring this pressure for a long time without ever telling me a word? I thought of the past days. Lu Yan still laughing, still carefree, showing no sign of trouble at all. Was he forcing himself to hide it, the same way I was hiding my own past? Two closest friends, it turned out, were each carrying secrets they didn't dare speak aloud. That evening, Lu Yan and I left a small gathering at a neighboring official's estate together, walking home along a quiet road beside the city wall. There was no warning. A figure lunged from the shadows, cold steel flashing straight toward Lu Yan. I reacted before I could even think. My body lunged forward on its own, shoving Lu Yan aside while drawing the short blade at my hip to parry the strike. The clash of steel rang out sharply. Seeing the attack fail, the assailant fled back into the darkness, vanishing before we could react further. Lu Yan sat on the ground, face pale, staring at me in disbelief. You just saved me?" I stood there catching my breath, my hands still trembling from the reflex. Strangely, I hadn't thought at all before acting, only pure instinct, urging me to protect him at any cost. Despite knowing the future, despite carrying all this hatred, when Lu Yan's life was truly in danger, I hadn't hesitated for even a moment. Perhaps, deep down, I had never truly wanted him to die. After the failed assassination, Lu Yan grew unusually quiet. He kept glancing at me, his eyes a mix of gratitude and something searching. "How did you react so fast?" Lu Yan asked one afternoon as we sat drinking tea. "It's like you already knew something was going to happen." I froze for half a beat, my grip tightening slightly on the teacup. "Just reflex," I said, keeping my tone light. Lu Yan said nothing more, but his eyes stayed fixed on me, the same look he'd always given me whenever he suspected I was hiding something back when we were children. He'd always had a sharp instinct for whenever something was off with me, no matter how well I thought I'd hidden it. I lowered my eyes, pretending to focus on my tea, but inwardly I stayed on guard. If Lu Yan kept digging, sooner or later he'd realize something wasn't right with me. And I wasn't ready for him to know the truth. That night I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. On one hand, I told myself to keep my distance, to stay clear-headed. This Lu Yan might still become the traitor of the future if I wasn't careful enough. On the other, the image of him fretting over me while I was sick, his pale face asking, "You just saved me," kept surfacing, softening my resolve. I buried my face in my hands and sighed heavily. Hatred and affection, two opposing forces, kept pulling at me harder with each passing day. I could no longer be certain whether I was here to prevent a tragedy, or simply because I wanted to live through these days with Lu Yan one more time. If it was the latter, then I was deceiving myself. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to think of that fateful rainy night, the blade, the blood, the betrayal. But the memory no longer felt as sharp as before, buried beneath layers of new memories, blurring the line between past and present. In a fitful dream, I found myself back on that rainy night, the blade through my chest. Lu Yan's trembling face, his grip unsteady on the hilt, the sound of rain. My own voice, weakly asking why, but this time in the dream, I looked closer into his eyes in that moment. No cruelty, no satisfaction. Only despair, and a pain I had never allowed myself to see while I was alive. I woke with a start, cold sweat soaking through my back. Could it be that even in the moment he struck me down, Lu Yan hadn't wanted to do it at all? The thought left me more unsettled than ever. If Lu Yan truly had been forced into it, then whoever stood behind him, whoever had driven him to the point of killing his closest friend, that was the real enemy I needed to find. But hatred had run too deep in me for too long to let go of in a single night. I held my head in my hands, torn between pain and doubt, unsure what to believe anymore. The next morning, I decided to try keeping my distance from Lu Yan. I made excuses about being busy with estate matters, declined our usual sparring sessions. I avoided our walks through town, avoided sitting together at meals, deliberately filling my time with unnecessary tasks. But after only 3 days, I found myself restless, unsettled. By the 4th day, hearing that Lu Yan had come by the estate looking for me while I deliberately avoided him, a strange emptiness settled in my chest, as if I'd lost some essential part of myself. I stood behind the door, peering through a crack, and saw Lu Yan standing in the courtyard, bewildered, asking a servant why I wouldn't come out. My heart tightened. I had meant to use reason to maintain a safe distance. But it turned out over 20 years of closeness wasn't something a few days of avoidance could sever. I opened the door and stepped out, pretending I'd just returned. "Did you need something?" Lu Yan looked at me, his eyes a mix of relief and hurt. "Have you been avoiding me?" I couldn't answer. That evening, Lu Yan pulled me to a quiet corner of the garden behind the estate. "Xie Han, I need to ask you honestly," he said, his tone unusually serious. "You've been hiding something from me these past few days, haven't you?" I stayed silent, unsure how to respond. Lu Yan sighed, his gaze softening. "Never mind, I won't ask anymore, but there's something I need to tell you, something I've kept to myself for a long time." My heart skipped a beat under the pale moonlight. Lu Yan looked straight into my eyes, his face rarely so earnest. "Xie Han to me. You're not just a close friend." He hesitated but pressed on. "I, like you, not the way friends like each other." The air seemed to still. I stood frozen, unable to speak. This was the first time in both my lives that I had heard Lu Yan say this so clearly. My chest ached, not from pain, but from too many emotions crashing in at once. Joy, fear, and the lingering shadow of the blade in the rain still lurking somewhere in my mind. "Lu Yan, I opened my mouth but didn't know how to continue. I stood frozen under the moonlight, watching Lu Yan wait for my answer, my heart a tangled mess I couldn't untie. I wanted to say, "Me too." Wanted to pull him close, erase every distance I'd tried so hard to build these past few days. But that rainy night was still there, a scar that had never truly healed. If I returned his feelings, if I let myself go deeper into this, was I not simply leading myself back down the same road, only for it to hurt far worse this time? "I need time," I said, my voice hoarse. "I'm sorry." A flicker of hurt crossed Lu Yan's eyes, but he nodded anyway, forcing a smile. "All right, I won't push you." I turned and walked away before he could see the turmoil written across my face. That night, I lay in bed staring blankly at the ceiling, wondering whether I was protecting myself or once again pushing Lu Yan away, driving us both straight back toward the very tragedy I had sworn to prevent. A few days later, the air between Lu Yan and me had grown strained. I made myself busier, avoiding any private conversation. Lu Yan, on the other hand, seemed determined to break down the wall I'd built, constantly finding excuses to come by the estate. "Are you just going to keep avoiding me forever?" Lu Yan finally snapped, catching me trying to slip into my study. "I'm not avoiding you," I said, though my own stiff tone betrayed the lie. "Not avoiding me, and yet you haven't looked me in the eye all week." Lu Yan stepped closer, an edge of frustration rare for him. "Xie Han, I didn't confess to you just so you'd start treating me like a stranger." I choked on my words, unsure how to answer. "If you don't have feelings for me, just say so." Lu Yan pressed on, his voice softer now but still laced with hurt. "Don't leave me hanging like this." I looked at him, wanting to explain everything but unable to force out a single word. In the end, all I could do was stay silent, and that silence hurt worse than any rejection could have. After that argument, Lu Yan stopped seeking me out. For 3 days straight, I saw no sign of him, not even in the places we used to frequent. Worry crept into my chest, tangled with guilt. I heard from acquaintances that Lu Yan had grown unusually quiet lately, often sitting alone, no longer wearing his usual smile. "He probably thinks you rejected him," my aide said quietly, catching me staring absently toward the Lu estate, my hand clenched. I had never said I was rejecting him. But the way I'd avoided him, the way I'd stayed silent all these days, wasn't that its own kind of rejection? I thought back to the hurt in his eyes that night. His words, "Don't leave me hanging like this," echoing in my mind. I was trying to protect us both from a future tragedy. But was my own hesitation now creating an entirely new wound, right here in the present? While I was still torn over how to mend things, my aide brought news that turned my blood cold. "My lord, I've found out who's behind the pressure on the Lu family." He lowered his voice, his expression tense. "It's a court official trying to force the Lu family into helping with some scheme for power." My fist clenched. "Forcing them how?" "It said he holds evidence that could ruin Lu Young Master's father. He's threatened to expose it all unless they cooperate." My heart raced. This This was exactly the detail I had never known in my previous life. It wasn't that Lu Yan wanted to hurt me. It was that his family had been driven into a corner, forced to choose between protecting their own and staying loyal to someone he loved. I closed my eyes, feeling as though a crucial piece had just clicked into place. That night, I sat alone for a long while, piecing together everything I knew. In my previous life, I had never dug into the Lu family's affairs, too trusting, believing there was nothing worth suspecting. Because of that, I never knew how long Lu Yan had silently endured this pressure alone, never once telling me by the time he was forced to choose between his family and me. He had chosen his family, not because he didn't love me, but because there was no other way out. That fateful blade in the rain, perhaps, hadn't come from true betrayal at all, but from the final act of a man driven to the edge, with no choice left but to save the people he loved. I held my head, relief and pain tangled together as I finally understood the truth, and realized I had hated the wrong person for all these years. If this truly was the root of the tragedy, then the real enemy I needed to face had never been Lu Yan. I had my aide dig deeper, this time focusing on the Lu estate's recent dealings. 3 days later, the news that came back left me stunned. "My lord, I found a copy of an agreement. Lu Young Master personally signed it, pledging to assist that official with something related to the upcoming imperial examination. The exact details are still unclear, but the signature is undeniably real." I held the copied document in my hands, each familiar stroke of Lu Yan's handwriting cutting deeper into the suspicion I'd already been carrying, so it wasn't just idle threats. Lu Yan had truly put pen to paper, binding himself to some agreement with the one manipulating his family. Forced, truly, or had there been some willingness to compromise? I gripped the paper tightly, torn between the trust that had just begun to rekindle and a wariness that had never fully died. I knew I couldn't rely on guesswork any longer. It was time to ask directly. I went to the Lu estate late one afternoon, unannounced. Lu Yan came out to greet me, slightly surprised to see me but still polite enough to invite me in. The air between us still carried a trace of awkwardness from our last argument. I didn't beat around the bush. "Lu Yan, I know an official at court is pressuring you. I also know you've signed some kind of agreement with him." Lu Yan's face went pale for a moment before he quickly composed himself. "You investigated me? I was worried about you," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm despite the storm inside. "Tell me what's really going on." Lu Yan fell silent for a long moment, his eyes avoiding mine, his hand gripping his robe tightly. "It's not something you need to worry about," he finally said, his tone stiff. "I can handle it myself, Lu Yan." I stepped closer, gripping his shoulders, forcing him to look at me. "Stop hiding it from me. I don't want to watch you carry something dangerous alone without a word to me." Lu Yan looked at me for a long time, as if weighing something in his heart. Finally, he sighed, his shoulders sagging as though setting down a burden he'd carried too long. "All right," he said, his voice weary. "I'll tell you." Lu Yan explained, his tone even but laced with tension he couldn't quite hide. The official had approached the Lu estate not long ago, holding evidence that could ruin his father's reputation entirely. In exchange for his silence, he demanded Lu Yan's cooperation in something tied to the upcoming examination, the details of which Lu Yan still didn't fully understand. "I didn't dare tell you," Lu Yan said, eyes lowered. "I was afraid of dragging you into it, afraid your family would get pulled in too." Listening to him, my heart ached with both sorrow and a lump in my throat. He had shouldered this pressure alone all this time just to keep me out of trouble. "You're an idiot," I said softly, my voice unsteady. "Something this big and you kept it all to yourself." Lu Yan looked up at me, a flicker of surprise crossing his face at my reaction before it slowly melted into warmth. Even after learning the truth, a corner of doubt in me still refused to fully let go. The memory of that fateful rainy night still haunted me, keeping me from ever fully lowering my guard. I quietly had someone continue watching the official's movements, while also secretly keeping an eye on Lu Yan's own meetings, in case he was hiding something else. But this move, I hadn't expected, backfired. The officials' men noticed someone surveilling them and immediately suspected Lu Yan had leaked information to an outsider, a violation of the secrecy clause in their agreement. A few days later, Lu Yan came to me, his expression uncharacteristically panicked. "Xie Han, did you have someone watching them?" he asked, his voice trembling. "They just warned me, said I'd broken the agreement and there'd be worse consequences if it happened again." I froze. I had only wanted to protect Lu Yan, but my own excessive caution had unwittingly pushed him into greater danger. Not long after, the official personally sent word to Lu Yan, no longer a vague threat, but a clear ultimatum. Lu Yan was to prove his loyalty by cutting all ties with me entirely, or worse, by directly acting against me to demonstrate he had fully sided with them. Otherwise, his father's secret would be exposed immediately. Lu Yan came to me to deliver the news, his face as pale as death. "They want me to choose," he said, his voice breaking. "My family or you." I stood frozen, the feeling of history repeating itself settling over me exactly as it had in my previous life, only this time, I was witnessing every step of Lu Yan being cornered, instead of only receiving the sudden blade in the rain. And I realized, despite all my caution, despite every effort to change fate, I was still, indirectly, pushing Lu Yan toward the very edge I had sworn to prevent. Lu Yan didn't come to see me for several days. When my aide reported back, his tone was awkward. "My lord, I've seen Lu Young Master meeting frequently with the officials' men lately. Some say he's even revealed things related to you." I frowned, forcing myself to stay calm. "Did you hear what exactly?" "Not clearly, but..." Lu Young Master seemed quite friendly with them. An uneasy feeling rose in my chest. I reminded myself this could simply be a front, Lu Yan pretending to cooperate to protect his family, just as he'd promised he would never truly betray me. But reason and emotion were two different things. With every new piece of news, no matter how hard I tried to hold onto my trust, some part of me still trembled, remembering the feel of that blade through my chest years ago. I wondered, was Lu Yan truly just playing a part? Or had circumstance pushed him to a point where even he could no longer tell the difference between the mask and the real choice? That evening, I happened to witness a scene that turned my whole body cold. From a distance, I saw Lu Yan standing with the official in a secluded corner near the city gate, the two of them talking closely, Lu Yan even handing him a stack of papers. I ducked behind a wall, my heart pounding, unable to believe what I was seeing. What were those papers? Information about me, about my family. The memory of that fateful rainy night surged back violently, layering over the scene before me. The hatred I thought had eased over the past weeks flared up again, fiercer than ever. So it was true. No matter how hard I tried, no matter how much I trusted him, the outcome couldn't be changed. Lu Yan once again was betraying me. My hands shook, not from fear, but from a fury burning through my reason, wiping away every doubt, every sympathy I'd ever held for him. I returned to the estate like a man who had lost himself, with only one thought consuming my mind. History could not be allowed to repeat. This time, I would strike first. I ordered my aide to prepare everything necessary, sharpening with my own hands the sword that had hung untouched on the wall for years. In my mind, the image of Lu Yan handing those papers to the enemy replayed over and over, each time deepening my resolve. That night, hearing that Lu Yan had gone alone to the garden behind my estate, perhaps looking for me to talk, I was already waiting, my hand gripping the hilt of my sword. "Xie Han, Lu Yan appeared, about to say something. "There's no need." I cut him off, my voice ice cold, stepping toward him with sharp eyes. "I've seen everything." Lu Yan froze, bewildered. "Seen what?" "Xie Han, listen to me." I swore an oath, I said, my voice trembling with fury, gripping the sword tighter. That history would never repeat itself again. I raised the sword, my gaze without a trace of hesitation. But just as the blade was about to fall, an image suddenly flashed through my mind, not Lu Yan's betrayal, but myself, these past days, quietly having him watched, suspecting his every gesture, every word. My hand froze midair. Wasn't this exactly the scenario I had once pieced together myself? My own suspicion had led the official's men to discover someone spying, which in turn made them suspect Lu Yan of leaking secrets, driving him into a corner where he had to prove his loyalty. If that was true, then the scene I had just witnessed, Lu Yan handing papers to the enemy, could that have been part of a forced performance meant to protect both me and his family? The sword in my hand trembled violently. Lu Yan stood before me, not flinching, only looking at me with eyes full of pain, as if already braced to accept the blade. "If you truly want to kill me," he said, his voice quiet but steady, "then go ahead, but at least hear me out first." I stood frozen, still holding the same stance but with no strength left to bring the blade down. In my mind, fragments of memory began piecing themselves into a complete picture, not just of this life, but of both. In my previous life, I had never investigated, never suspected, and when disaster struck, I was caught completely off guard, unable to react, only receiving that fateful blade without understanding why. In this life, I had swung to the opposite extreme: suspicion, surveillance, excessive vigilance, and in doing so, had pushed Lu Yan straight into the very danger I had sworn to prevent. In both lives, I had been part of the cause behind the tragedy. Only in different forms, one born of blind trust, the other of blind suspicion. The sword slipped from my hand, striking the ground with a hollow clatter. "Tell me," I whispered, my voice breaking, all the killing intent gone. "I'm listening." Lu Yan sat down beside me in the dark garden and told me the whole truth. The papers I'd seen him hand to the official were, in fact, forgeries, deliberately drafted by Lu Yan himself with false information, meant to buy time while he searched for a way to turn the situation around. "I had no other choice," Lu Yan said, his voice weary. "All I could do was pretend to cooperate while trying to find a way out for both my family and for you." I sat still, listening to every word, feeling as though someone had just turned my entire understanding upside down. It wasn't circumstance that had driven us to the edge. It was me, carrying the fear from a death that had already happened, who had built up the suspicion, the surveillance, the vigilance, turning someone trying to protect me into a suspect in my own eyes. Hatred, it turned out, wasn't something I carried for protection. It was something that had quietly steered every decision I made, leading me straight down the very path toward the thing I feared most. I took Lu Yan's hand, apologizing without words. Before we could plan our next move, a servant from the Lu estate came rushing in, breathless with urgent news. "My lord. The official's men, they found out the documents were fake. They're on their way here now, saying they'll—" The servant gasped for breath, not daring to finish the sentence. Lu Yan's face went pale. "They're here sooner than I expected." I sprang to my feet. "Where are they now?" "Almost at the main gate." There was no time to think things through carefully. I grabbed Lu Yan's hand and pulled him running toward the Lu estate, my mind fixed on one single thought. I could not let even a fragment of the tragedy happen again. On the way, I saw a torchlight approaching in the distance, the sound of horses' hooves echoing through the night. Too late. Lu Yan gripped my hand tighter. "Whatever happens, don't do anything rash. Let me handle this first." I knew he was once again preparing to shoulder the danger alone. When we arrived, we found the official's men already surrounding the front of the Lu estate, led by a fierce-looking aide. "Lu, young master," the man said coldly. "The official already knows you've been playing both sides. There's only one way left to make amends: hand over what he wants tonight, or the entire Lu family can forget about peace." Lu Yan stood frozen, his face bloodless. I knew. What he wants meant the truth about me, information that, if handed over, would put me in no less danger. In that moment of desperation, I saw Lu Yan clench his fists, his eyes wavering violently. He was actually weighing it, betraying me to save his family, or risking everything to protect me. "Fine," Lu Yan finally said, his voice trembling but resolute. "I'll hand it over." I gripped his hand from behind, stopping him. "There's no need." I stepped forward, placing myself between Lu Yan and the men before us. "If you want information about me, come find me directly," I said, my voice steady. "Lu, young master, doesn't need to hand over anything." The aide narrowed his eyes at me. "And who are you?" "The one you're trying to dig up information on," I answered plainly. Tell your official, if he has the nerve, let him come face me himself instead of hiding behind threats against an innocent family." Not long after, the official himself appeared, likely not expecting me to confront him so openly. "Young Master Xie is quite bold," he said with a cold smile. "Do you think you can stand against me alone?" "Not alone." I glanced at Lu Yan standing behind me, my gaze steady. "I have Lu Yan, and together we will expose every scheme you've built." This time I didn't choose revenge. I chose to stand by Lu Yan's side, facing the real enemy head-on. The confrontation broke out right in front of the Lu estate gates. The official's men charged forward. Lu Yan and I fought side by side, blades flashing in the darkness. Unlike that fateful rainy night, this time Lu Yan and I stood on the same side, back to back, each covering the other's blind spot. "Are you all right?" Lu Yan shouted over the clash of steel. "I'm fine," I answered, deflecting a strike and countering without hesitation. Seeing the situation turn against him, the official tried to retreat, but was blocked by the very evidence I had quietly gathered over the past weeks. My aid arrived right on time, along with several neutral officials brought in as witnesses. Exposing the entire scheme to force the Lu family's hand, faced with such clear evidence, the official had no way left to deny it, and was finally led away amid a mix of satisfaction and relief from everyone present. I stood amid the settling chaos and turned to look at Lu Yan. Both of us were disheveled, out of breath, but the look we exchanged carried something that, across 2 lifetimes, I had never dared to believe I would ever have: complete trust, free of any lingering doubt. Once things had settled, Lu Yan pulled me aside to a quiet corner, looking at me with a thoughtful expression. "Xie Han, I have to be honest," he said. "These past few weeks you were different, colder, more guarded, not like yourself at all." I stayed silent, unsure how to explain something so hard to believe. "But tonight," Lu Yan continued, his tone softening, "when you stood between me and the official, facing him head-on, that was you again. The Xie Han I've always known, willing to risk everything for someone he cares about." I gave a small, bittersweet smile. Maybe I just needed some time to find myself again. Lu Yan tilted his head, curious but not pressing further, and simply reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "Whoever you are, however you've changed," he said, "I'll still be here." Those words filled me with warmth and a strange ache from a vague premonition I couldn't yet name. 3 days later, the court issued its official ruling. The official was stripped of all titles and imprisoned for coercion, threatening court officials, and conspiring to manipulate the imperial examination. The Lu family was fully cleared, their honor restored. News spread throughout the capital, and both the Lu estate and my own family received a flood of congratulations and well wishes. Lu Yan stood in the middle of the courtyard, and for the first time in weeks, I saw him smile freely, without a trace of tension or hidden worry. "It's finally over." He sighed in relief, turning to me. "Thank you, Xie Han. If it weren't for you, we did it together." I cut in, not wanting him to finish the gratitude. "Not just me." Lu Yan nodded, warmth glowing in his eyes, the kind of warmth I had waited 2 lifetimes for. I stood there, taking in this rare moment of peace, thinking to myself, I had finally done it. I had broken the cycle of tragedy, had protected the person I loved, but I never imagined the price for it was still waiting ahead. That night, returning to my room, a sudden wave of dizziness struck me out of nowhere. I staggered, having to grip the table to steady myself. A strange ringing filled my ears, along with the sensation of something slowly creeping deep into my mind. I stood frozen, my hands trembling. What was this? The dizziness passed as quickly as it came, leaving behind an unnamed unease. I looked down at my hands. Everything seemed normal, nothing visibly changed. But instinct told me something had just begun, quietly, irreversibly. I remembered the disembodied voice from the moment I was reborn. If you force fate to change, the price will be your memories. Back then, I had dismissed the warning without a second thought. Now, standing alone in the dark room, I began to wonder if I truly would have to pay that price. I couldn't sleep at all that night, sitting at my desk, trying to piece my thoughts together. Fate had changed. Of that, I was certain. Lu Yan no longer betrayed me. The conspiracy had been exposed, the Lu family cleared. That fateful rainy night from my previous life would now never happen. But what price came with that success? I thought back to the dizziness earlier that evening, the strange sensation of something creeping into my mind. It couldn't be coincidence. The warning from years ago returned to me now with far more clarity. Back then, I'd thought an empty threat meant nothing against my determination to stop the tragedy. Now, I realized I might have underestimated it. If my memories truly would be erased, what did that mean? Would I forget everything? Forget even what I'd just been through, forget even Lu Yan? The thought made my chest tighten, more painful than any physical wound I had ever endured. I needed to find out for certain before it was too late. In the days that followed, I found various excuses to separate myself from Lu Yan for short stretches of time, quietly seeking out sacred places, questioning local priests and mystics of renown, anyone who might know of the force that had granted me the chance at rebirth. Most simply looked at me as though I were speaking nonsense, refusing to believe a word I said. On the fifth night, kneeling before an ancient, abandoned shrine rarely visited by anyone, praying with all sincerity, the disembodied voice from before suddenly rose in my mind again, cold as if echoing from some distant realm. You have chosen your path, fate has changed, it cannot be undone. Is there any way to keep the memories? I asked, my voice trembling with fragile hope. There is not. My heart plunged into a bottomless pit. How much longer? Until the memories are gone completely. The voice fell silent for a long moment, then answered, brief and merciless, not long. I returned to my room, shut the door tightly, and stood alone in the darkness. Should I tell Lu Yan, giving him time to prepare so we could face what was coming together? Or should I keep it hidden, letting our remaining days pass in peace, unburdened by tears or despair? I imagined telling him the truth, how his eyes would look, how he would react upon learning that the person he'd just found again was about to forget everything, forget even him. I shook my head, pushing the image away. If I told him, the days we had left would be filled with nothing but tears, regret, and futile attempts to hold onto something that couldn't be kept. Lu Yan would suffer from this very moment on instead of only once, at the exact instant it happened. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding my head, feeling as though I were facing the hardest decision of both my lives. In the end, I chose silence, not out of cowardice, I told myself, but because this was the last gift I could give Lu Yan, days that were whole, untouched by worry or fear. From that day on, I changed the way I lived each day. No longer letting trivial matters eat away my time, I devoted every moment I could to Lu Yan. A morning spent sparring together, a lazy afternoon lying beneath the locust tree listening to him ramble, an evening watching the moon together for no reason at all. Lu Yan, oblivious to it all, only felt happy that I seemed closer than ever lately, rarely refusing his invitations. You've been surprisingly obedient lately, he teased, grinning, agreeing to whatever I suggest. I only smiled, saying nothing, quietly memorizing every expression, every word, every laugh of his, as if gathering enough to carry with me, even though I knew in the end it would all disappear. But Lu Yan wasn't so easily fooled. You're hiding something from me, aren't you? One evening, sitting together by the lotus pond behind the estate, Lu Yan asked suddenly, his expression uncharacteristically serious. I startled, forcing myself to stay calm. What makes you think that? You've been different lately, Lu Yan said slowly, as if choosing his words carefully. Like every time you're with me, you're trying to memorize something. Sometimes there's a sadness in the way you look at me. I stayed silent, unable to find any words to deny it. Xie Han, you can tell me. Lu Yan said, taking my hand, his voice earnest. Whatever it is, I want to face it with you. My heart ached. I wanted so badly to tell him everything about the rebirth, the warning, everything that was about to happen, but I only shook my head, forcing a smile. It's nothing, don't worry so much. The next morning, I decided not to give Lu Yan any more chances to question or doubt. I sought him out first, early in the day. Free today? Come with me. Lu Yan looked surprised at my rare initiative, but quickly nodded, his eyes lighting up with excitement. I led him through every place we'd been close to since childhood. The small river behind the estate where we used to run and play, the tea house at the end of the street where Lu Yan always fought to pay, the small hill on the outskirts where we used to skip lessons to fly kites. "Why do you want to visit all these places today?" Lu Yan asked, walking beside me, laughing without a hint of suspicion. "Just wanted to relive some memories," I said, keeping my voice light despite the storm of emotion churning inside me. The afternoon sun painted the familiar road gold, and Lu Yan walked beside me, chattering about everything the way he had in the old days. I quietly watched him, trying to carve this image deep into my mind, knowing that before long, it might all become nothing but emptiness. That evening, we sat on the small hill where we used to fly kites as children, watching the sunset fade slowly on the horizon. "Lu Yan," I said softly, "thank you for always being by my side." Lu Yan turned to look at me, a little surprised by the sudden words. "What's gotten into you thanking me out of nowhere? Just wanted to say it." I smiled, keeping my voice as steady as I could, even as my chest tightened bit by bit. "If there's a next life, I hope I still get to meet you. Why do you keep saying things like they're last words today?" Lu Yan laughed, though a flicker of worry crossed his eyes. I shook my head, offering no further explanation, only reaching for his hand and holding it tight, as if trying to etch this warmth into every fragment of memory I had left. "Whatever happens," I whispered, almost speaking only to myself, "I've already been so happy, living through this time again by your side." Lu Yan held my hand tighter, not fully understanding the deeper meaning behind my words, but leaning his head gently against my shoulder, letting the sunset paint the sky red before us. On the way back to the estate, I suddenly stopped mid-step, a wave of dizziness hitting far harder than before. The world before me blurred for a moment. I heard my own voice or someone's calling Lu Yan's name, but the sound grew distant, as if sinking into a thick fog. "Xie Han." "What's wrong?" Lu Yan caught me, panic clear in his voice. I gripped his sleeve tightly, trying to stay conscious, trying to hold on to every fragment of memory that had begun to tremble, flickering like a candle in the wind. Not yet. Not yet. I still hadn't finished what I needed to say. "I'm fine," I whispered, cold sweat beading on my forehead, just a little dizzy. But deep down, I knew this wasn't ordinary dizziness. This was the beginning of what I had feared all along. There wasn't much time left. I grabbed Lu Yan's shoulders, looking straight into his eyes, trying to say the most important thing before it was too late. "Lu Yan, there's something I need to tell you." My voice trembled, both from the lingering dizziness and the emotion surging within me. A sharp pain shot through my head, sudden enough to force my eyes shut. In that instant, images of the rainy night, the disembodied voice, the entire journey of Rebirth, all of it began to shatter, dissolving like sand slipping through my fingers. I tried to hold on, tried to finish the sentence, but the words kept slipping from my grasp, impossible to catch. "Xie Han?" Lu Yan gripped my shoulders tighter, his voice edged with panic. "What are you saying, Xie Han?" I looked at him, my lips still moving, but I could no longer remember what I had meant to say. The most important words of my life cut off midway, forever left unfinished. When I opened my eyes again, the headache had eased, but there was a strange emptiness in my mind, as if some large part of myself had just been taken away. Before me stood a young man, worry etched across his face, gripping my shoulders tightly. "Xie Han, you're awake. You scared me half to death." I frowned, looking at the person in front of me with some confusion. This face felt familiar, but I couldn't place why. "I'm sorry, who are you?" I asked, my voice still weak. The man froze, as if he'd just heard something unbelievable. His eyes shifted from worry to confusion, then to pain. "You don't remember me?" His voice trembled. "It's me, Lu Yan. You just said you had." I shook my head, an inexplicable pang of guilt settling in despite not understanding why. "I'm sorry, I don't remember anything." The man named Lu Yan stood frozen, his eyes slowly welling with tears. "This can't be," Lu Yan murmured, his voice breaking. "We grew up together more than 20 years. You can't have forgotten everything." He took my hand, his eyes pleading. "Remember, when we were kids, we used to run along the river behind the estate. You fell in the water once and I had to jump in to pull you out. I stepped back, uncomfortable with the sudden closeness from a stranger. I truly am sorry, but I have no memory of that at all. What about the hill where we flew kites, the tea house at the end of the street, the lotus pond behind the estate? Lu Yan pressed on, his voice growing more urgent, as if trying to salvage something slipping through his fingers. You just took me to all those places last night. I looked at him, a mix of confusion and pity rising in my chest. The man before me looked so devastated it made my own heart ache, even though I didn't understand why. I think you might have me confused with someone else, I said softly. I'm sorry. I turned and walked away, leaving behind the sound of my own name, broken, calling out into the wind. Weeks passed, and my life gradually settled back into its normal rhythm. I no longer remembered anything from before, no memory of a childhood friendship, no memory of any connection to the Lu family, other than knowing they were a family of officials with some long-standing ties to my own. Occasionally, at gatherings between our two families, I would cross paths with the man named Lu Yan. Each time, he would look at me with a strange expression, hopeful, yet guarded, as if waiting for something I couldn't begin to understand. Young Master Xie. He greeted, bowing politely, though something about it felt forced. It's been a while. Young Master Lu, I replied, keeping to the same formal courtesy one would show a mere acquaintance. Nothing intimate, nothing special, just the way two strangers might treat each other at gatherings like this. But sometimes, I caught myself lingering a little too long on his retreating figure as he walked away, a vague, nameless feeling passing through me that I couldn't quite explain. Lu Yan began finding every possible excuse to appear closer to me, sometimes using estate business as a pretext, sometimes coincidentally running into me at the tea house I frequented, sometimes sending unexplained gifts. At first, I simply thought of him as a polite acquaintance. But as his appearances grew more frequent, I began to find it irritating. Young Master Lu, I said, keeping my tone formal but distinctly cold upon finding him waiting outside my estate gate for the third time that week. What business brings you here today? Lu Yan faltered at my distant tone but quickly recovered his smile, though it came out somewhat strained. No business at all, I just wanted to visit. I'm afraid I'm rather busy, I said, maintaining my distance. Next time, please don't come unless it's important. With that, I turned and went inside, leaving Lu Yan standing alone at the gate, his gaze following my retreating back, full of hurt I didn't bother to turn and see. But that blunt rejection didn't seem to discourage Lu Yan in the least. He kept appearing, only more subtly now, no longer waiting outside my gate, but coincidentally showing up wherever I happened to go, keeping just enough distance not to irritate me, yet close enough that I couldn't ignore his presence. One time, caught in a sudden downpour on my way home, an umbrella appeared over my head from nowhere. Turning around, I saw Lu Yan standing there, one shoulder soaked through so I could stay dry. No need to thank me, he said quickly, as if afraid I'd refuse. I happened to be passing by. I looked at him, meaning to say something cold as usual, but the words caught in my throat. This isn't even on your way, was all I managed to say in the end. Lu Yan only smiled, said nothing more, and walked quietly beside me the rest of the way without another word. Gradually, I found myself growing used to Lu Yan's presence. Even as I tried to maintain a certain distance, on days he didn't show up, I felt an odd emptiness I couldn't quite explain, though I refused to admit it. Why have you been taking such good care of me lately? I asked bluntly one time when Lu Yan brought over a bowl of steaming medicine, somehow knowing I had a slight cold, even though I'd never told anyone outside the estate. Lu Yan paused for a moment at the question, a fleeting, unnameable sadness crossing his eyes. No particular reason, I just wanted to take care of you. That simple answer, for some reason, sent a small ache through my chest. I looked at him, wondering why this near stranger could occupy my thoughts so much, gradually lowering the guard I had worked so hard to build. There was something about Lu Yan, a sincerity that couldn't be explained by reason alone, quietly seeping into my heart, slow but unstoppable. One afternoon, Lu Yan asked to meet me on the small hill outside the city, a place that, though I couldn't say why, always felt strangely familiar whenever I visited. Xie Han, he called my name, his tone unusually serious. I know you don't remember me, don't know why I keep appearing around you like this. I stayed silent, waiting. I won't bring up the past anymore, Lu Yan continued, his eyes steady on mine. I just want you to know right now in this moment I like you. Not because of whatever we once had, but because of who you are right now. The evening breeze drifted across the hill, carrying the familiar scent of grass. I don't need you to remember anything, he went on, his voice soft but strangely earnest. I just want to start over with you, no matter how long it takes. My heart beat faster, a warmth spreading through me that I couldn't explain by any reason at all. I stood still, looking at Lu Yan as the sunset settled around us, a strange feeling rising in my chest as though this scene, this moment, was something I had lived through before. Lu Yan, I heard myself say without thinking. If there's a next life, I hope I still get to meet you. The moment the words left my mouth, I froze. That wasn't what I had meant to say. The words had come pouring out from somewhere deep inside me, a place I hadn't even known existed before me. Lu Yan looked just as stunned, his eyes suddenly reddening, his lips trembling, unable to speak. You. What did you just say? He asked, his voice breaking. I shook my head just as bewildered myself. I don't know, it just slipped out. Lu Yan looked at me for a long moment, then smiled softly, a smile both pained and warm in a way I'd never seen, and reached up to gently touch my cheek. Then, he whispered, shall we start again this time? I didn't fully understand the meaning behind those words, but my heart, for some reason I couldn't explain, quietly nodded in agreement. Sometimes, the most painful thing isn't being betrayed by the person you love. It's discovering that they never wanted to betray you at all. Xie Han managed to change his fate, but the price was losing every memory of the person he loved most. As for Lu Yan, though he now lives in a future no longer stained by blood and regret, he still has to learn how to love again someone who has forgotten him completely. If it were you, would you choose to keep your memories, to always remember the one you love, or give up everything so they could be happy, even if, from then on, you'd be nothing but strangers to each other?